Hi, I'm Ed Alexander, and this is the Friday Mailbag segment for Alexander Abramson, a business law firm in Central Florida. I'm opening our segment today here in Halscott Regional Preserve, which is in East Orange County. It's a great place where I like to go and ride. There's many miles of dirt road out here, and I can ride the 29 Plus bike and really have an enjoyable time. It's a great place to relax and to think and all sorts of stuff. And as every business owner knows, having a little bit of time to sit and think and consider things is always super valuable. It usually leads to a great outcome. Okay, now on to the mailbag. Okay, welcome back. So in today's Friday mailbag, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. One that has really been prevalent. We've gotten a lot of calls on this issue, and it regards the PPP loan. And in particular, there's been some news recently. The SBA and the Treasury put out a notice that if the loan was not necessary, and I think that's the word they use, is necessary, then criminal fines could be imposed of up to $1 million and imprisonment for up to 30 years. This has naturally gotten business owners freaked out. And so the SBA, unfortunately, was supposed to release regulations regarding the PPP loan forgiveness and things of that nature on April 26th. We don't yet have those. Now, as I'm recording this, it's 11 days later, and we don't have those. And the first round of PPP loans is complete, and the second round is either nearing completion or has already completed. But the point being that we have a bunch of business owners who've received loans who are now freaking out because they don't know whether they qualify under the standards set by the SBA. Now, the SBA then created a safe harbor provision that allowed businesses to pay back the loan by May 7th, and there would be no criminal or civil penalties associated with it. And so obviously that safe harbor provision has passed. So let's take a look at what the SBA said in their frequently asked question. It's question number 31. And their response was really threefold. The first is that the obligation to determine whether a borrower needs a PPP loan is on the borrower themselves. And that determination is made at the time of the loan application. So when you're submitting that loan application, there's a certification that you're going to make, or you have made, that says that economic uncertainty, current economic uncertainty, makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. The PPP loan suspends the requirement that the applicant not be able to secure credit elsewhere. So even if you have a credit line, or even if your bank is willing to make you a loan, that does not make you ineligible. So the real standard here is current economic uncertainty. And that's a bit of an unknown, because under most SBA disaster-related loans, you have to have suffered an economic injury. And so what's the difference between suffered an injury, right? You've actually got suffered the damages to your business, and economic uncertainty. Well, I think economic uncertainty obviously looks towards the future. And so this is really an unknown area. But when I look at this, I think to myself, okay, what are the normal, ordinary meanings of these words? What are we looking at? And I go back to economic uncertainty, and that is your business likely to be impacted by virtue of the pandemic, by virtue of the closing of the business? Now, if your business has increased, and you have expected that to come because maybe you have a counter-cyclical business or something like that, then there's probably not economic uncertainty. But for many businesses, there is. Now, having said that, we are talking about a bureaucratic governmental entity, and we really do need to see what those regulations say before we can determine economic uncertainty. So right now, if you know, hey, we aren't going to qualify because we're countercyclical, because we definitely were not at a point where we thought we were going to lose business, then that's something you need to consider. Maybe, and you got a PPP loan, maybe you need to, go ahead and repay that up there. Our second question comes from Janet, who's in the construction business. Janet asks, my business cash flow has dropped and I can't pay the bills, loans, trade payables, that type of thing. Do I have to file bankruptcy or is there another way? I think it's important to remember that if you have an LLC or if you have a corporation, the general rule is that the owners of that entity are not liable for the debts of the entity. Now that's the general rule, so there can be exceptions to it, and I'll go over those in a minute. But what this means is that if the business cannot pay its bills, then the creditors of the business have access to the assets of the business and nothing more. They can't automatically come to the owners, whether that's members, whether that's shareholders, and get them to pay the bills of the business. That's why we form limited liability companies and corporations, to protect the owners from the debts and obligations of the business. Okay, so what are the exceptions? Well, the typical exceptions are going to be, number one, you've guaranteed some of the debts. This will typically be the case with a bank loan or with a lease. You'll have provided a guarantee, and at that point, then you'll have to make good on that debt, or you have to deal with it through a personal bankruptcy there. And the other way that you can really mess this up is if you take money out of the corporation or the LLC when it doesn't have any profits. So typically what happens is an owner will pay themselves a salary, W-2 compensation, and then they'll also pay themselves a distribution. The reason they do this is because the distribution isn't taxable as ordinary income, so you don't pay FICA and Medicare on it. Now, what happens is if there's no profit, you can't take a distribution. If you do take a distribution, then what happens is that distribution can be required to be paid back to the corporation. So you can be liable for that amount. There are other conditions under which you can be liable for debts and obligations, such as you're signing paychecks and the company's not paying the trust fund payments to the IRS, things of that nature. So it's really particular to your circumstances, and you want to definitely get some advice on how to do this. But to go back to the question, the answer really depends on whether the business itself has life left in it. So sometimes businesses become over leveraged, or they have issues, but there's cash flow there. And if those debts were restructured, then that cash flow could employ people, could pay the debts over time, these types of things. In that case, it may make sense to file a Chapter 11 petition. Now, it used to be that Chapter 11 was only available to large companies, but there's a new subchapter in 11, and it makes it much easier for smaller companies. If you want more information about that, give us a call. We'll definitely put you in touch with the right people who can help you out. So if bankruptcy isn't right for your firm, what do you do? Well, you can go through a process that's set forth in the statutes that allows you to dissolve the firm. So you file articles of dissolution with the state, and then to provide notice to the creditors so they can make their claims. And essentially what that does is that brings all the claims to a point and allows you to deal with them and to liquidate the business in an orderly fashion. And again, we do that on a fairly regular basis. The issue there is what happens if an owner guaranteed a loan or an owner guaranteed a lease, and now we're dissolving the company. Sometimes the owner would need to file personal bankruptcy as a result of that, or often we'll try and work that out with the lender or with the landlord so that there can be a payment, and they can go on and relet the property or whatever the case may be. So if you have an issue with your business and you're looking at it saying, what do I do? don't get overwhelmed, right? That's obviously, this is a very stressful situation, but at the end of the day, realize that there is a way out of this. We would be happy to help you to get to that point and answer any questions that you have regarding it. So give us a call. Look forward to talking to you.